Thank you very much, Charbel, and I want to thank Charbel and Perusia for inviting me to be part of this afternoon for this conference here at this lovely Croatian Community Church. It's a great honour to be invited, and it's also a great honour to be speaking side by side with Edward Shree. He's a fantastic apologist and lecturer and teacher, and I think it's first time I've probably shared the stage with someone of that calibre. And again, it's a great honour. I want to thank you for coming. I thank you for giving your time and for being here this afternoon to listen to this talk, which I think is a very, very valuable talk, very powerful topic. The title of the talk is Into the Breach. I didn't invent that title. That's the title of a bishop's pastoral letter. Bishop Thomas Olmsted from Phoenix, Arizona. He brought this out in 2015, and it's a clarion call to men. Men to be the men they are called to be. The concept of breach, into the breach. I'm a bit of a fan of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and those movies, and you often see 10,000 orcs attack a castle or a fortress, and they want to breach that wall. And they break through that wall, and who goes into the breach? The courageous ones to block that hole, to stop the enemy pouring in and conquering that city. And they fight off the orcs, etc. That's what we're called to do. There is a great breach. The enemy's pouring through. We have to stand up. We have to be the men God created us to be, called us to be, graced us to be, and to fight this battle, because our faith is under fire. These are very difficult times. I believe I'm a realist. I'm a pessimist, but I have reason to be a pessimist, of course, in the context of Christian hope. Okay? I'm not giving up. We have Christian hope. God wins the battle for us. But He's asking us and He's calling us to co-fight that battle with Him. As Charbel said, I've been teaching for 30 years, and the vast majority of that time, I don't go around telling people that these are the last days. Because I'll end up getting a lot of egg on my face, no doubt. I used to frequent the Baptist church on and off for 6 years in my late teenage years and early 20s. And they used to talk a lot about the end times, the end of the world, the rapture, the second coming, the last judgment and all that. People who set dates, give times for these events often end up being wrong, getting egg on their face and being discredited. I don't do that, but what I'm beginning to feel in my own private opinion is that we are certainly heading into more precarious times, scary times. And when I look at these following words of St Paul, what he wrote in his second letter to the Thessalonians, I feel we are in these times. He says the following: "Let no man deceive you by any means, for unless there come a revolt first, and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." Now, Paul is talking about that man of sin, what we might call the Antichrist. I'm not going to focus on him. I'm going to focus about these words: the revolt must come first. I personally believe, and you don't have to believe me here, that we are living in these times of the revolt. You can call it the revolution, the revolt against God. In my late teens, early 20s, when I hung around the Baptists, I thought that the last times, the end times, were about 20 years before the second coming. No, that's not the case. This revolt that Paul speaks about, that I think is occurring now, that we are in the midst of, has been a very long process of many centuries. From the end of the Middle Ages, the High Middle Ages, through the Renaissance, the Protestant Reformation, the Enlightenment, and all these isms that we've had in recent times: liberalism, socialism, communism, Nazism, materialism, secularism, feminism, radical feminism, now postmodernism, modernism, postmodernism, whatever ism, these are different phases of the one revolt. And we're now at the pointy end of this revolt. How are we going to survive and thrive in the context of this revolt? And this is what Bishop Olmsted is calling men to be. This revolt has caused a breach in society, a breach in the church, a breach in our families, a breach in the lives of numerous millions of individuals. I think this revolt And I just focus on certain aspects of the revolt now. What are the challenges now that we face as men in the Western world? And this is only a summary of certain aspects of this current revolt. We have the sexual revolution, which I believe is destroying everything that we know. We also have the new atheism. We have the challenge of the growing rise and power of Islam in the West. And we have the problem of postmodernism. Some of these words are technical. What do they mean? I remember listening to lecturers years ago on this concept of postmodern deconstructionism, and I'll sit there and yawn. What are they talking about? It sounds so boring. It's actually more critical than we think. We now live in an age which is hostile to Christianity, which hostile to the very idea of God, hostile to the very concept of truth, and destroying everything we know and hold sacred in society, particularly the family, through the sexual revolution. These revolutions, this revolt is essentially destroying, unraveling the great revolution that Jesus Christ brought into the world. What I call the Jesus revolution. How do I sum up or summarize the Jesus revolution? What did Jesus bring into the world that changed the world for the better? Humility, integrity in life, esteeming virginity, celibacy for the sake of the kingdom, purity as against lust, chastity in our lives, love of poverty and simplicity, fidelity and permanency in marriage, openness to life and children, sacrificial, unselfish love. These are, in my opinion, the core pillars of the Jesus revolution. What Jesus brought into the world that transformed the world into a new civilization of life and love. And historians would call that Christendom. A Christian kingdom, Christian civilization, Christian laws, Christian customs, ambiances. This is what this revolutionary process, and the father of this revolution is the diabolos, the divider, the devil. This is what the devil is seeking to destroy now, and what I believe we're witnessing in our world today. What are we? Now I've just focused slightly here, again, one aspect of this revolt, and I have a pet hostility to the sexual revolution. And I'll outline now, in particular, what this one aspect of the revolt is targeting. It's destroying respect for the body. How? Through promoting nudism, pornography, the abuse of the body, particularly our sexual organs, for example, through glorifying masturbation, glorifying drug use. This is attacking the human body, which God has made in his likeness, something good. The sexual revolution is destroying premarital chastity. If you go out there saying, I'm going to teach chastity to children, you are going to be mocked. You're going to be resisted and fought. You're going to be accused of causing psychological harm to children. Premarital chastity is under attack through the fornication culture. Sex with anyone, anytime, any way you like, it doesn't matter whether you're married or not. And we're not here to engage in sex for procreation purposes. It's just for our own raw pleasure. Without responsibility, without commitment, without sacrifice, without authentic love, which is self-giving. Just look at the other as an object for my own pleasure. And of course, another aspect of that is, now you look at our language, how it's changed. When you want to insult something, you say, for example, you've prostituted something. We can't use that word anymore. Prostitution is not a bad thing anymore, according to the sexual revolution. Prostitution is now a service, a much needed service. They're sex workers providing an important service to men in need, for example, or women. We've destroyed long ago, centuries ago, the permanency of marriage as a sacrament. This needs to be restored. The idea that marriage comes from God, That marriage between a man and a woman, two becoming one that begets a third, reflects the Trinity. Marriage is also in the image of God. And the revolutionary process is attacking marriage as something that comes from God, marriage as something that is sacred, marriage as something that is permanent. We threw out the permanency of marriage long ago. Long ago, and how is the permanency of marriage challenged and attacked? Through promoting adultery, through promoting divorce culture. We have an industry now specifically devoted to destroying fidelity in marriage. You go to Sydney International Airport and you'll see banners up there from a company called Ashley Madison. Put your hand up if you know anything about Ashley Madison as a company. Who's heard of Ashley Madison? Okay. It's not an individual woman by that name. This company is devoted to providing, particularly men, or men and women, the service of sexual gratification while you're travelling overseas. You only live once. You're going to be alone while you're overseas. Have a bit of fun while you're overseas, okay? It doesn't matter if you're married. In fact, that's irrelevant. We want you to have this extra fun on the side. Just ring us. We'll provide the service for you. I know at least 30 million people are subscribed to this company. Someone did a hacking job on it once and released many names of the clients who use the services of this particular company. It's specifically aimed at promoting adultery and inciting adultery. Manhood is under attack, masculinity is under attack. When you hear the term toxic masculinity, I can't help but think, really, this is just a general all-out frontal attack against masculinity per se. Now, we want to attack toxic masculinity. We want authentic manhood, and I'll come to define authentic manhood in due course, okay? But we seem to be now denigrating manhood per se and saying that men in general have a tendency to be predators, to be abusers, to be violent, to be rapists, to be murderers. You see this every time there's a terrible murder somewhere of a woman walking in an isolated part of a capital city, and the debate then turns to accusing men in general of being abusers and predators and murderers, etc. So is under attack. We don't call father. I staff member my teams where I work just 3 days ago complained to me she did a staff meeting where she quoted from scripture. Actually, this is a Croatian woman that I work with, a lovely woman, and she said to me, I did this staff meeting, Robert, at this primary school, and I quoted this verse from scripture from Mark's Gospel, chapter 16, and talked about God the Father and the Son, and baptize all nations in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And the teachers objected to this language. It's too masculine. It's too male. We don't want to call God Father anymore. We don't want to call the Son anymore. Male pronouns. We've got to feminize. We've got to, because fatherhood itself is a problem as well as manhood, because fatherhood, manhood, patriarchal, oppressive, etc. Okay, then we're attacking the complementarity of men and women. Gender warfare. We want to put men and women adverse to each other. The language is, men oppress women. We need to liberate women. Again, manhood, malehood, fatherhood are the problem. The language here is divisive, not complementary. God created man and woman to be complementary, to be for each other, to complete, to perfect each other, to serve each other. But the divider, the diabolos, wants to put division between man and woman in conflict. We're attacking the heterosexual couple as an image of God in the world. I've already mentioned, I'll say it again, God created man and woman for each other, for marriage, to become one, beget a third. This is the image of the Trinity. The Father, the Son, knowing and loving each other from all eternity, beget a third, the Holy Spirit. But we're attacking this image of God in the world, the heterosexual marriage and the family that comes from heterosexual marriage by promoting pseudo-marriage. And I'll say it frankly, marriage between a man and a woman and a man and a woman and a woman is not marriage. It's not my definition of marriage. I once gave a staff meeting to a school in the Shire. And before I opened my mouth, before I said a word, 3 staff members did a protest, one at a time. They each stood up, one at a time, and they said the same thing. I support gay marriage. Then sat down. Second staff member stood up. I support gay marriage. Then sat down. The third one, I support gay marriage. Then sat down. Well, I support God's marriage. And I'm going to say something even more radical. I'm a firm supporter, 100% supporter of same-sex divorce. 100% supporter. Because that's not God's plan for humanity. That's not God's plan for life and love. And I love all people, irrespective of their sexual disposition or attraction, because I want all people to get to heaven, and there are lifestyles that preclude us from the kingdom. And I can stand here and quote Galatians 5:19 to 21 like any other famous footballer, because St Paul was right. And St Paul said those words in love, and that famous Australian rugby union player said those words in love, and we say these words in love. Because I've taught enough young men who are same-sex attracted, and I have no hostility to them personally. I want them to live God's life for them. The life of chastity, holiness, self-control, and that's the road to heaven for them. And that's authentic charity, to ask them to live that lifestyle. Procreation's under attack through contraception, sterilisation, and abortion. We're attacking the bonds between parents and children through creating this so-called generation gap. We've long ago dismantled the extended family and pushed grandparents and uncles and aunties out of the picture. We glorify the nuclear family, then they attack the nuclear family. We want to get rid of old people through euthanasia. They've done their time. Got to knock off the old bird. Got to knock her off the perch because she's really eating up our inheritance. And transgender ideology is the latest fad at the moment. There'll be others coming after this as well. These are just segments of one part of the revolt. That part of the revolt we call sexual revolution. These are segments of that one part. I haven't even mentioned the other storms that are consuming our Western world. The rise of Islam, the new atheism. You read the literature of the new atheism, how hostile it is to Christianity and all religion. Postmodernism. What's postmodernism? Modernism said we will believe nothing on faith. We will just believe what we can know through the use of our senses and our reason. So I will be reasonable, and reason is opposed to faith. I'll believe nothing on faith, nothing on alleged revelation. I'll only believe what I can test empirically through my senses and intellect. Well, postmodernism goes beyond that. Postmodernism says we can't trust our senses. There is no objective truth. Even if there is, we can't know it. We make our own truth for ourselves. What's true for you is not necessarily true for me. I create truth for myself. I create my own story. Forget the Judeo-Christian story, the Judeo-Christian meta-narrative. In fact, we can go further. Here's another technical term called ontic postmodernism. We can't even believe in a reality. Everything we see around ourselves is an illusion. So if I believe in allithic postmodernism, I believe that there's no truth. And if I believe in ontic postmodernism, I believe there's no reality. It's all an illusion. This is the consequence, by the way, of the Enlightenment. I don't call it the Enlightenment. I call it the Endarkenment, because it was a revolt against the theology and the philosophy of St Thomas Aquinas and his school of moderate realism, which is another technical term to just say knowing reality as it is. knowing things in their origin, the first cause God, knowing things in their essence, knowing things in their purpose, that's Catholic philosophy, which is really building on Aristotle, etc. That is the road to sanity and the road to heaven, side by side with theology, which builds on this philosophy. That's where we need to return to. Basically, there was one Australian theologian, philosopher, very famous, long dead, been dead for 40 years now, Dr Austin Woodbury, a Marist father, founded the Aquinas Academy in Sydney. I was taught by some of his disciples. I did 9 years of study in the Centre for Thomistic Studies, and one of them once said to me, Dr Woodbury said it's Thomism or it's madness. I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. Many years later, I realised he's true, he's right. It is Thomism or it's madness. And how do I know that? From looking around what's happening now in the world. The world is going mad. It's been mad for a very long time, and it's going more mad as we speak. And Bishop Olmsted, in this pastoral letter, is advising us and guiding us how to avoid this madness. But I think it's worse than madness. It's badness. I think there's a hostility here. There's a genuine, deep-seated desire in this revolutionary process to come after Christianity and to efface it from the earth, and to come after each and every one of those who still want to remain faithful. This is what I call the politically correct dictatorship. If you want to use a short term, the PCD, the politically correct dictatorship, which uses psychological warfare, Psy-war for short, to gaslight you. You know what that term means, to gaslight you? I think I'm normal. I believe in God. I go to church. I pray. I believe in reality. Okay, I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. I believe in heaven and a hell. No, modern society says you're crazy. You're backward. You need psychological counselling. Gaslighting is an attempt to make you think you're actually mad. That they're okay, they're the progressives, they're the moderns, we should catch up with them, and because we refuse to, we've got the problem. And that's what we're facing, psychological warfare. And an attempt at the same time to deny our freedom. Now, I have issues with Israel Folau. He's very anti-Catholic. He says many things which are ridiculous about the Catholic faith. But what my response would be is that, no, don't sack him as an Australian footballer. He's a good footballer. What he says he did in his private time, got nothing to do with his football. Okay, what he says is ridiculous, and I will counter it publicly. And I'll show what he says is ridiculous. That should be enough for everything he says. The fact that they've come after him to destroy him in his employment, and even his wife as well, is evidence of their utter intolerance. These sexual revolutionaries, back in the early mid-50s, mid-60s, late 60s, early 70s, they went out there demanding freedom, liberation, equality. Now they're in the ascendant. They have just showed their true colours. They are the most intolerant, oppressive, exclusive, when they have the ascendancy to oppress and exclude and punish us, ridicule us, mock us, put us away in jail. And this reminds me of what's happened to Cardinal Pell. What's happened to him is part of this broad-based anti-Christian sentiment that's now pervasive in our own culture. Whatever you might think on the legalities, and that's an issue that I have a strong opinion on, I certainly don't believe that that the prosecution discharged their burden of proof on the balance on beyond reasonable doubt. I don't think that's the case. We'll let the Supreme Court Appeals decide that ultimately. But I really think there was a bloodlust in our culture, in our society, to get him no matter what. But even more disturbing than that, as much as disturbing as that is, was that listening to so-called conservative media, reading the Australian, listening to 2GB, anyone who dared open their mouth in support of Cardinal Pell to offer an opinion as to the justice of his conviction someone who's studied the case very well, like Peter Westmore, who's done a brilliant job there. Anyone who dared to utter a word in favour of Cardinal Pell was hounded, shouted down, mocked, ridiculed, abused in so-called even conservative media. Again, it's evidence of this now pervasive anti-Christianity in our culture. The sexual revolution has promised freedom and greater happiness. But what are the real fruits of the sexual revolution? They're very bitter fruits. How many people are now addicted to pornography? Addicted to self-abuse through masturbation? We have now greater loneliness in society. Do you think divorce liberated people? Makes them lonely. Do you think divorce liberated women? Makes them lonely and also live in poverty. Countless broken hearts. Now I'm extracting this directly from the bishop's pastoral letter. He lists the following as the bitter fruits of the sexual revolution: deeper loneliness, countless broken hearts, broken lives, broken marriages, broken homes, broken dreams, massive levels of sexual transmitted diseases and AIDS, increased domestic violence, greater poverty, widespread drug use, increased psychological disorders and despair, increased suicides, greater levels of sterility, falling birth rates, declining populations, aging populations, economic stagnation, and the sexual abuse crisis in the church and institutions. There's two streams of thought about what are the remote causes of the sexual abuse crisis in the Catholic Church. One view, it's about clericalism, misuse of power. Well, of course it's a misuse of power, but that's the consequence, not the cause. What's the cause of the misuse of power? The sexual revolution invading the church, invading the hearts and minds of each individual who's committed these crimes. You see, you have to be an interior castle. One of my favourite books I read in the early 90s was this book called The Interior Castle by the great St Teresa of Avila, 16th century doctor of the church. She's a really tough mother, really tough. I have a great admiration for her. Here is our castle, the heart. This is where the battle is being fought. If we want to talk about into the breach, you can't come into the breach and fight the battle unless you've fought and won the battle here in the heart. Your heart has to be strengthened to be practicing virtue, to be practicing chastity, purity, fidelity, etc. And you can't do that by yourself. You can't do that by your own strength. Because of original sin, we are inclined to be, we are disordered in our appetites. We have concupiscence, here's another long word, concupiscence, disorder in our appetite for pleasure, which impacts immediately and broadly on our sexual appetite. How do we get this interior castle built and stay strong? By the grace of God. I'll come back to that later. I sound rather dramatic and I can be pessimistic, but I'll argue that my pessimism is based on realism. But one reason why, I have many reasons why I'm not despairing, why I'm very hopeful, because this has all been foreseen. It's in Scripture and it's in private revelation. You see, the words of St Paul to St Timothy elsewhere talking about the end times, what people will be like. Lacking reverence, lacking respect, lacking honour, lacking decency. Then you have Christ saying, recorded in Luke's Gospel, chapter 18, when I return, will I find faith on the earth? They're pretty grave words. I'll say them again. When I return, will I find faith on the earth? So when I have a look at the world, when I have a look at how Christianity in the West in particular is in decline, and I read the literature of the new atheists mocking and laughing and cheering at this decline, I'm not despairing. This was foreseen. This has been foretold. Christ spoke of it, and in a sense, I don't like this cliche, but I'll use it, it's all under control in a sense. When you read the private prophecies of Our Lady of Good Success in Ecuador, Quito, Ecuador in the 16th century, and you read the prophecies of Our Lady of La Salette, and you read the prophecies of Our Lady of Fatima, all speaks about this. There's my hope. There's my confidence. That's the platform that enables me to say, look, Robert, get up in the morning. Don't despair. Don't throw in the towel. okay? There's still a fight to fight, and you've been called to be part of that. You're small, you're tiny, you can't fight this by yourself, but you can do what you can where you are. Same goes for you. You can do what you can where you are. You're here today, that's wonderful. Fantastic. You could be out there watching the football at the moment, going to the football, going on a picnic, doing other things that are really nice with your family, but you're here today for a reason. You want to be fortified in your faith. And we need to be fortified in our faith, not to be stagnant and hide away in the corner of our home, but to be that apostle and that evangelist where you are, an impact on the people that are immediately around you. You can't fight this fight by yourself. I already said that. I'm not original in saying that. That's been the church's teaching since year one. That's Christ himself who said, without me, you can do nothing. So if we're going to fight for Christ, we have to be linked with Christ. And that's why he gave us the church. And that's why he gave us the sacraments. To be the instrument of salvation for us and to give us the grace that we need to walk this journey and to fight this fight. So, I presume you're doing this already. But maybe some of you are not. And maybe some of you are feeling the grace, the call from God. I want to do something. Well, this is where you need to start. What can I do? Where do I start? Well, this is where you start. You start with prayer. It has to be regular daily prayer. You have to be attending the church, not to keep the numbers up. By the way, the numbers attending church are bad. In this country, 11% and going down. Within 20 years, it'll be down to 3 to 4%, because most of that 11% are up 55 years plus. When they pass through the system, we're down to 3 to 4%. The number of kids coming out of schools who are still going to mass regularly, and by the way, regular mass attendance, according to these statistics, is just once a month. 3 to 4% of young people go to mass once a month. That is below the age of 20. Why do you need to go to Mass? To lift these stats up? To make the priests and the bishops look good? No. You need to go to church, to go to Mass, because that's where you get the graces you need to remain faithful and to fight this fight. You need to fast. Fasting is a form of prayer that God accepts for good intentions, to win graces from him for your good intentions. But it also gives you discipline over your body, the ascendancy of your spirit over the flesh. This is the battle you need to fight interiorly to fight that exterior battle. Because if you're not winning in the heart, you can't win anywhere else. You need your family, you need your friends. Because we're human beings, we're societal creatures. We just need other people's support, words of encouragement as props. To look at each other, to pray for each other, to smile at each other, to give us words of encouragement, because we can easily fall into despair. I've already mentioned prayer every day, and also as a family. Some of you are married, some of you have children. Some of you have been married for a long time. Already I've had a couple of people come to my table, talk to me about the problems they have at home. Maybe one reason why is that we haven't connected immediately with our kids. I'm not an expert, I'm not perfect. I'm not. We all got issues. But there has to be a prayer in the home. You as a man need to be visible in your home, to be seen by your children, even if they're adult children now, or grandchildren you've got, to be praying. Men need to be praying in front of other people. My dad was a good man. He's been dead for over 30 years. God rest his soul. I know he believed because he taught me to believe. He gave me words of encouragement. I never saw him pray ever. I know he did pray, but I never saw him pray. You have to be seen to pray in front of your children. The young men here who might be newly married or not, or hoping to get married and hoping to have children one day, if you have boys, they are not going to take up the faith if they don't see it from you. They want to be like Dad. Dad's not praying. Dad doesn't care. Dad just uses dirty language and shouts all the time. That's how I'm going to grow up. But if Dad's praying and he's that rock, they'll try and be like that one day. When one day some of their friends might make fun of you and say, your dad's a sissy, he goes to church and he prays, he's a wimp, you'll stand up for your dad. And then you want to be like him. You have to have daily examination of conscience in your prayer, in your private prayer. You have to have regular mass once a week, and if you feel the impulse to go more, go. I think one of the greatest gifts I ever got in my life was in Ash Wednesday 1987, which was the 4th of March 1987, where I made an impulsive decision that morning. For my Lenten sacrifice, I'm going to go to Mass every day during Lent. And after that, that continued. So as a private devotion I go to Mass every day. I'm not the only one in this room who does that. But it was one of the most wonderful things I did in my life. And if you can be a man who goes to daily Mass, and you'll be an incredible influence on those around you. When I used to work at Westpac Banking Corporation, the guys asked me, where do you go for lunch, Rob? I was 24 years of age at the time and embarrassed to say it. Where do you go to lunch, Rob? You never come with us. Where do you go to Mass? Where do you go to lunch? Actually, I go to the cathedral. You go where? I go to the cathedral. Which cathedral? Up the road here, St Mary's. What do you do? I go to Mass. You go to Mass? Yeah, every day. And so they called me Weirdo. That was my nickname at Westpac in Legal Services Division, Weirdo. One day this guy named Anthony was sitting opposite the other side of the table. We were processing some documents. Anthony said, oh look Robert, I could never do what you do, but I have to say I really admire it. So without even trying, it had an influence on some people. If we are men who are regular Mass goers, daily Mass goers, you can be a very powerful agent of transformation for those around you. Monthly confession, minimum. I say once a month. I know the church says once a year. The church is a mother. It doesn't want to impose too much on us. Once a month. Get that indulgence that's offered to you every month. It's available to you every month. And you need to connect, to fight this fight. Friends, as I said, family, connect like this. This is fantastic. I'm stunned with forums like this. I think they're just wonderful. I'm seeing in Sydney now, and I've already spoken to 2 other men's events this year. Only one yesterday, by coincidence. It's been a busy weekend. I'm going to get in big trouble. It's my wife's 50th birthday today, and I'm here. So I'm in big trouble. And Robert, you're going out there giving talks to men about being a good man and being a good husband and being a good father, and it's my birthday and you're not around. So I'm in big trouble already. So that's why I have to leave and make sure I have a good night with my wife tonight and the rest of the family to celebrate her very important 50th birthday. Okay? But these events for men, I'm ecstatic to see them. They're just wonderful because we've been neglected for so long. Now, we needed to help women. The good side of feminism was important. Women were mistreated, were abused, were undervalued. You know, there was a time in Western history where we didn't take women seriously. They didn't have legal capacity. They couldn't enter into contracts. They couldn't own property. They couldn't vote. This was all wrong. And the good side of feminism liberated them from that, because recognise that they are equal in dignity as human beings to men. That's all good. I have no problem with that level of feminism. The radical feminism is another story. But in the course of liberating women, we forgot about men and their needs to a large degree. So the growth of these new male apostolates, men's apostolates, to help men be better men is good for women, because women need better men. Okay, so I'm really great to be involved in something like this and to see these things grow. All right. Into the breach. We're called to be that warrior in this battle. And I've already said that the most important battle, the best way for you to prepare for this battle is the interior preparation. I'm going to go back to some traditional Catholic concepts of how we should live. Some of us are a bit old-fashioned. Who's heard of the term strict custody of the senses? Put your hand up if you've heard of the term strict custody of the senses. 1, 2, that's father and one other person. Okay, what that means, it's a pretty tough way of saying it. Basically, it means Be on your guard as to what you watch, what you look at, what you listen to, what you read, what you expose yourself to. Because of original sin, we're all vulnerable. You know, Robert, I'm married. I've been married for 20 years. I'm very happily married, thanks God. I want to stay faithful to my wife. If I'm not faithful to my wife, my marriage falls apart. My family falls apart. I will fall apart. I'll be useless. I've got to drop this microphone and go. I have no right to speak in front of anybody. Absolutely no right. So I have to be careful about what I do in life, where I go. I can't go walking down King's Cross red light district 1 o'clock in the morning in front of all the so-called, you know, or I'll say it and I'll name it, all those strip joints. I can't be there. Put myself in danger, moral danger. Even when I go to a youth mass at my parish at St Sharbles, Maronite youth mass, 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning or 7 p.m. in the evening. Too many young girls there, too many young women. I've got to be careful. I've got to keep custody of the senses. I can't be looking at every good-looking girl that goes by. I've got to keep my eyes for my wife. I mean, I can look at another woman, but I can't keep staring and admiring to the point where I begin to get tempted. I can't be listening to corrupt rock music, popular music. Not all popular music's bad, by no means, but a lot of it is. A lot of it promotes evil. Just at a simple level, bad language, revolt against parents, drug use, sexual imagery constantly, and it's even moving to the satanic. And by the way, part of this revolution that I didn't mention, the latest phase, and this has become more noticeable during the Obama administration in the United States, the public manifestation of Satanism in the United States, where Satanism as a religion is now asserting its right to freedom of religion, and now coming out publicly, and now demanding, for example, if you're going to open this local council meeting with a prayer, demanding the right to say satanic prayers at some of these council meetings, erecting satanic statues. This is happening. And it's only the thin edge of the wedge. And it's another foretaste of the next phase of this revolutionary process, which is, you might be surprised to hear this. There are different aspects of Satanism. Luciferianism Luciferianism actually isn't necessarily promoting the worship of Lucifer, but promoting the ideal of what Lucifer offered in the garden, that we get liberated through knowledge. It's a form of Gnosticism. Your liberation doesn't come from faith and humility and detachment from material things and striving for another life, afterlife. Your greatness will come through not faith but knowledge. Not detachment from the material, but the accumulation of the material. Not seeking another world, but seeking to be glorified in this world. That's Luciferianism as a philosophy. Again, that's growing as well. The other aspects of what we should be doing if we're going to enter into this fight, and focusing now here on you as individuals, presuming that you're married, you've got a family, you've got to be the Adam in that family. You've got to search yourself. Your home has to be a Garden of Eden. The original home, that original sanctuary, the Garden of Eden, was invaded. It was Adam's responsibility to repel Lucifer, to be the guardian of the garden. He failed. He allowed his wife to be seduced. He did not repel the serpent, and he allowed himself to be conquered by the serpent through his wife. Jesus is the new Adam in a new garden that undoes that. But you have to be your Adam in your garden, so you have to protect the boundaries of your garden. So what type of home do you create? What are you allowing in? What are you repelling? Do you have a culture in the home from the time when your kids are beginning to realize that they exist, of teaching them to be discerning? You can watch that, but not that. Turn that off now. Don't listen to this. You can listen to this. You can read this, but not that. Are you the Adam guarding the frontiers of your home? Also, I've been focusing on this concept lately. The concept, what I call SLAP. It's an acronym, SLAP. S-L-A-P. That's not a nice word. What are you talking about here, Rob? These 4 words: selfishness, lust, anger, pride. These are 4 general problems that men have, among other problems, generally, that I've identified as common things that afflict us. This relates also to us as married men and the quality of our marriage, the quality of our relationship with our wife. No matter how long you may live for, how long you're married for, your marriage goes up and down like a roller coaster. I used to think that for me, it was a 6-week roller coaster. Every 6 weeks, I'll end up having an argument. It's fine for 6 weeks. Then for some reason, an argument breaks out. And it takes about a few days or a week to get over it, and then you have another 6-week break, and then it happens again. That was me, how I was trying to analyse my own marriage. But when I began to analyse my own situation, my own relationship, and sometimes when I was away from home for a while, and I'm on a pilgrimage, or I've got time to pray or meditate, focus on a retreat, and focus on myself and try and see, okay, do an examination of conscience, what's going right, what's going wrong, I began to identify these elements. And I think what we don't realise is that sometimes we are overly selfish. This is about purification of the heart here. That sometimes I'm not the man I'm meant to be because I'm selfish. Christ was the most unselfish one. As a man who's married with a wife and children, I'm called to be unselfish. I'm called to be a person who exists to serve, sacrifice, and to suffer for the other. I'm called to be that person who looks at my spouse as that gift from God, that Dorotheos, gift of God. Dorothy is an English name, actually it's 2 Greek words, gift of God. I'm meant to have a look at my wife as that gift that God has given to me. That person I'm meant to live with, and that person I'm meant to live for. An authentic manhood and an authentic father, to be that authentic husband is not to be that domineering and demanding individual who expects my wife to be my servant and at my beck and call, but looks at her as God's gift and the one I'm called to serve, to sacrifice for, and to suffer for. And likewise her for me. This is mutual, not one-way traffic. We are to serve each other in this relationship, and together we do the same for our children. It's agape love. It's eros elevated to agape. Eros is good. Physical, sexual in the context of marriage, but not looking just at my wife as a sexual object for pleasure, but looking at her as a partner, a gift from God, destined for heaven, same dignity as myself, that I'm meant to serve. I'm greatest as a man, as a husband, as a father, when I'm that servant for the other. And we also, through that, we conquer the L, the lust, so that I'm moving from just the pleasure. In addition to the pleasure, I'm willing, the love I have is expansive, it's diffusive, and it's a love for the other, irrespective of how she might look, how long we've been married for, whether we're bored with each other. Nevertheless, this is a love that overrides all that. And instead of anger, how do I respond when maybe I could be challenged by my wife, or contradicted by my wife, or corrected by my wife, or mocked by my wife, or whatever, because for various reasons? How do I respond? Do I respond through anger? Do I insult her? Do I abuse her? Do I name call her? Do I shout at her? Or do I respond with a level of acceptance and meekness and patience and see the truth in what she's saying and respond to that? And instead of pride, there's that humility in truth. When I suffer from pride, I don't want to be corrected. I think I'm the boss. I'm the overlord. You exist for my glory. When I'm proud, I fantasize excessively to be, I wishing I was something else or someone else, not accepting from God who I am, not accepting from God the gifts He's given me or the mission He's given me. When I live in truth, humility in truth, I'm accepting the person who God created me to be. I'm acknowledging and accepting the gifts He's given me, the mission He's given me, and joyfully live that out, not desiring to be someone else, something else, not desiring to be the center of attention, not desiring to dominate the conversation, etc. But living the reversal of slap must lead to us being the better men we're called to be. The better husbands we're called to be, the better fathers we're called to be, and better equipped to enter the breach that we're called to enter into. Because the first battle we fight is interior, the second battle we fight is in our home, the third battle we fight is outside of the home. And I'll just come back to, we've got 10 minutes to go, just come back to the bigger picture fight. There's part of this psychological warfare that's been played against us. I remember when I talked about the politically correct dictatorship and war and gaslighting and all that, is name calling. Everything we say or do now is insulted as a phobia. It's called a phobia. So if I, during the recent same-sex marriage debate, went around campaigning or giving talks or proclaiming that my definition of marriage is God's marriage, one man with one woman. It's no other definition is marriage. I'm called a homophobic. If I got a problem with radical Islam or Islam per se, I'm called Islamophobic. And it goes on and on and on. And they use the term phobia to make us uncomfortable. Again, it's a form of gaslighting. No, I don't want to have phobias. I don't want to be seen as someone with psychological disorders, irrational fears. No, I'm not that. Well, actually, you are not that. These are not phobias. These are, again, just focusing on this example, the same-sex marriage debate. My position on marriage is not a phobia. It's a reasoned position based on revelation, and I can support it through reasonable arguments. And there's no phobia here involved at all. No irrational fear involved at all. What you're saying is just propaganda. It's an insult meant to deter me, to embarrass me, to put me into a corner, to make me afraid to open my mouth. There's no phobia here. But nevertheless, we're still going to be name called. And what I'm leading up to here now is that we have to, in this battle, entering the breach and fighting these battles wherever, one thing we have to be resigned to accept is that we're going to be name called, no matter what. And how do we respond to that inevitable tactic that's used against us? We can't just fold our arms up, accept the insult or the tag, and retreat and go silent. We have to call out that attack for what it is. It is propaganda. It is an insult that has no basis whatsoever. And we have to push back and say, there's no phobias here. They're guilty of phobias all the time. Christophobia, theophobia, verophobia, afraid of truth, or all these other phobias, right? But we have to be like those in the early church. And we all know about the persecution of Christianity in the early church, and my fear is that we're not heading forwards, we're heading backwards. We could well be heading back to a time like the first 2.5 centuries of Christianity before Constantine, where it was illegal simply to be a Christian, and it was a death sentence to be a Christian, and the only evidence needed to be brought against you was the fact that you held the name Christian. That was sufficient, that's all you needed. I studied St Justin Martyr, who died in the year 165, at the age of 65 years him and his 7 students. The trial of St Justin and his 7 students took 4.5 minutes. We've acted it out. What was the evidence? You're Christian. They refused to deny that. They're all beheaded. The courage involved here was phenomenal. This is the courage of the martyrs that we celebrate in our liturgy, in our history books, in our lives of the saints. And we wonder, can we ever be like that? Not by ourselves, we can't. There's going to come a time where we might be called to become like that. And we can't think that persecution is so far off it can never happen here in Australia. So thanks be to God, it's never happened to that level of a red persecution. We're certainly at the level of a white persecution. We have persecution in the media, in the culture. I mean, I could easily one day lose my job for saying the following. Listen to this. How many phobias are contained in this statement? In God's plan for life and love, sex is only meant to be between a man and a woman in the context of marriage. A marriage that is freely entered into, exclusive to all others, subsists until death, and naturally open to the possibility of life. Sex in that, and only in that context, is from God and is good. How many phobias in that? No. And how many people in the future who want to be steadfast and hold on to that ideal are going to lose their jobs, be vilified in the media, be brought before tribunals and magistrates and courts? We've seen in the last 100 years tens of millions of Christians put to death. The 20th century was the worst century in the history since Christ walked the earth when it came to Christian martyrdom. At least 42 million people died because they held the name Christian. Whether they were Catholic, Orthodox or Protestant, whether it was in the Soviet Union, Communist China, North Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, Nazi Germany, Islamic fundamentalist nations, whatever, Mexican Revolution, Spanish Civil War, whatever it was, tens of millions were put to death. It's a very real possibility now. If we can't stand up and absorb insults which are just words, using words as weapons, if we can't stand up upright in the face of weapons which are just words, how are we going to stand up upright if the persecution goes to the next level and we're brought before tribunals and we are sacked from our jobs and we're sentenced to jail, etc., as we see happening in the case of Israel Folau and Cardinal Pell? How are we going to have the courage to be those future witnesses and future martyrs if necessary? And that's why we have to be people of humility and people of prayer and people of fast and abstinence and penance and humility, not presume on our own strength, but presume only on Christ's grace to be faithful to him. Just looking at the time now, I only got a couple of minutes. The words of Bishop Olmsted in this pastoral letter are very stark sometimes, very black and white, which I think is a good thing. We need that level of clarity in our teaching today. Can be a little bit pessimistic, as I was now in this last 45, 50 minutes, but in the end, very hopeful. You see, as I said, I am a person of hope. Christ has won the victory. He did that on the cross. He did that on Mount Calvary. It's a victory that can never be taken away. I believe in his promises. I believe he'll come again. And even if it's the end of the world or not, it doesn't matter. Today, about 150 to 160,000 people die in the world. It's the end of the world for them. Are we ready for that day? If we're ready for that day, we're ready for every other day. Certainly now it's dark. My prediction is going to get darker before it gets better, but it will get better. When you're faithful, you cannot lose. You can never lose. You might lose your life, but you won't lose your soul. And every struggle against this revolutionary process, every little victory that we earn when we stand firm in the faith is all recorded by God in the book of life. So there's nothing vain in our struggle. And even if we end up being martyred, like the martyrs, that was their victory. That was their crown. And we have to put ourselves in a spiritual condition to be perhaps one of those witnesses in the future. And if we are, well, the final victory will be ours, no matter what the battle, no matter how intense it is. On that note, I'll finish. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time for listening to me this afternoon. God bless.